Tanda gelagi soyate de this is like something share ayo marwa the tamputi yes please go ahead.
So a little on sleep and memory group first, because Jeremy gave his feedback and we haven't quite given our feedback yet.
Tanda tamputi la ni ta temba ko la science ge Jeremy ge sonsarwa ana ga so garanja ti son share ge ko ke ti choma son tamputi science.
So Jeremy pointed out that picture of the brain with the labels and the hypothalamus was in the wrong place. But the other thing that I was thinking about with that image is the brain areas that were blank to fill in were not necessarily associated with the sleep and memory centers. And so it'd be good to pick those places that fit with the lecture.
Tanda shoba tanda ge Jeremy lagi chesula tanda tina ne lepa gi partina ne mintre go chesu mintre tina la ya din notion du son as tanda lebu oma te sa ko no du son as tiningi dus tasdambala ya ani lepa gi saku khawa dis parton ko ya ta du resha simbana parton ko ya ge lepa gi chashi teta ani chani ta tamba ta draw.
So for instance, you could connect the cerebellum, and that was one of the things that was asked to be labeled, but you didn't really talk about the cerebellum in the lecture. And similar to what we had suggested for another group, when you have both sleep areas and the memory areas, if you have a picture with both of them together, that's helpful for students to see how they overlap and where they fit.
Tanda dela ya ni lepa sakuti tanda chesugudi sibikase ni ta tembarwa ni tambala ya lepa cheshe ni ta temba ni cha tanda o chiti zus nyam te yena ni loptila ya ko ni ji hakuya la ya shu pen thudus.
And there was a memory picture with two synapses, or one synapse, two neurons that were communicating with each other. And it was very low on the screen. I would lift that up a little bit, and then also make clear to your students that good memories may have better connections between those two neurons in terms of the synapse, but it's not like one synapse makes the memory. It'll be many cells coming together, making connections to make a memory.
Chu se tin desi jas tambalaya onsa thazin yu paru thunse yu chi parching do la tan son start party bete beta mata chi bete wala shortage de shasti yang khorchi thana ya service ro ne tela ya ne loptu sula ya ko ya pote che to ko ani sa mai ba chi ta ko ge tamba ya po yo patela ya ani onsa thapon paru ge ko drawa de ya po yo pata ta ko onsa thamba ma po yo pati desi ja ko ro imba na ya tela tin de de Temba said once a Tazini drought member, Mampula, Tuka Mawata, once a Tazu Mampu Paru, drought la Rally, Patasha of Tulaya, Kasukun Desijakudus.
There are examples where a synapse, a single synapse, may have a memory type of a thing in it. For instance, in sea slugs, there's what's called a gill withdrawal reflex. That is a circuit that people studied and actually got a Nobel Prize for their work looking at how things are remembered in one synapse between two neurons. But that's pretty rare in humans in terms of our memories.
Is that the cis legs lit and the chuno something chikuge once a treasure parola taku dunguch tandabi taxichi but tinechi is that taxichi de taxiti to tandelaya no beg is until a top day or is in by naya tena do once thazin ni ge paro la ya ani khu ge de tula tin de tan tramba ni ya chi ro tramba la ya chi ro o te tinda do ni tan khashi ma to pe ngasun do mi ba na ne once thazin ni ge paro ge ni paro ra la su ko da te la ya ani ngasu ge tramba te ge shu cham bo ngor sa te ani khapures.
We were happy overall with how all of you did. And I want to make clear that even things that I point out that I think you could improve, this is all to help you to make your lectures better, and also to see things in other people's presentations that you're like, oh, so you can learn from other people's things that we suggest changes on, as well as like things that were like, this was really good for your own presentations.
Ahanda danda nga suge de la ya chitsuge kasukure ta chendo sukur wadus jede chitsuge jemala chistambala yarje tanga chete dusche yus tinstambala ya shichane tanda ge tamche te ko ni ta tamba koter wadus pe apna sonsta tanda nga suge dina yaje tangu duse ti tsamaimba ne shenda ge rukha shenda ge ko tamse chibi kapse na ya re kusula de yaje tangu do ge yaje tangu do sa de la ya chechu ngune ya to na che tim se pe ya kusu ge jinde chibi kapsa ale de da ya ko shu chin do wa samya ge ya samse tin da yang gro wa o de ta chi samse songa da de sama ge la cha de ne susu ge land de susu ge je la ne pecho tang ko chi gu re ti che to ta da chi ko chon ta chi yaje tangu do se ne se ti la ta shu ge yes.
For group 3 on the spicy foods and mint and how they work, you should really make clear taste versus feeling of warmth and cold. So there was a lot of information on taste, which I think is important because you're putting it in your mouth, but also make clear that there's a difference between the taste of mint and the cool that you feel with mint.
Ahanda danda shenda te ga suge de ka sa khatsa u da shenda de ka sa mint sena ka rimba se suge himba phuari ko la ya desi ja sonsta te na ne che suge te kor de la ya ani ka sa nga suge ruchor chi ro ruchor ko la ya te se chambo ja sonsta imba na ruchor ko la ja korta ja ta ja ge si chi ta chi ba na ko nga su tuata se sta bande de le ja go yor was ta te li ko ge lika chi tan te mano in sta ba la ya ne che suge tanga suge feelings gro da ja ba ina ko chau choe ta su choya chuar wa ta choa gi dota chuar wa won so nilamba go dota chuar wa ti ko la ya ani tradition na ta ta ba yes.
And I would give more time to the heat and the cold sense and a little bit less time to the taste so that you can really talk about capsaicin and menthol, because you only had like the last 10 minutes that you talked about that part of it. And that's kind of what your focus is how are these things making heat and cold.
This tabalaya ni chute mawa tirwa ani kasanga su ruso nilemba giti tanga matang bache rakso nilemba sukura tanga su luso nilemba tingala ya tanga yona tatanda imba yes ro chisu tanda desi jang tambalaya gane ne ruso ko desi chuja bionte mayon tambalane kasa ani kasa spenala yopi makasana yopi capsaicin se tita ani kasa dia phuari nama yopi method da to ga ti kon desi jang tambala chesulan desi jang gi chita rama jons kama khasi masra kama jus masra yo marwa tele ani ti ga la chama ta ye tanda ge tinga su ta ro sor tan do wa ta ka wan sor tan do wa ri ge do tan tan din yo ate ka chaw nyo wa ta chaw nyo wa te wa ti ga la ma ta de ta ani shenda ga su ge ru chu ko la ya nyo wa ta yo pa na ta 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 yes.
And you did a great job talking about the nerves involved in taste. That was excellent. Then I would follow that with the nerve that's involved in the cold and hot sensation, which is the trigeminal nerve, number 5.
Danda diga chesuge rusurge kecheshen stambalaya rusur manda nilenchi ni ge wansa kolape ya punde sija sons tati nanshengi chesuge ani chawa tan siwa sikura chawa tan changwa ge ko nilenchi ni ge ani wansa hazu chugarwa ti tanda ge na ne rig tan gawa ne chisu songa o ti kolaya chi ti tan je chi de sija na ya hu chong ba yes.
And go ahead.
So I'll just jump in right here because that distinction between temperature, sensation, you had a slide that was very good, and you said the difference was sensation for spicy foods, but I think you meant somatosensation because taste is a sensation, but using the touch sense is different. So anything to do with, and you showed really good pictures about the skin and how it's processed in the same way that somatosensation is processed.
Truse damra chiro ta chau tang tang wa gu truse te chura gu kola ke she sons ta te kap se chu chite pe ju tang sta bala ya a chu chura ndo tong wa ndo ke she sons ta pe chu chura ne ma na ga su ya truth te ka sa routine ba na ta nyang gu yo to chau gu yo wa na ta de kap sang ne tang ne ba na che chu chite ke she sons ta bala ya ga su ga lu ni lam ba ga ne ro lu chu somato sensor se ro lu ni lam ba lu gi won so ta te ga ne ane de she ja gwa Yongres tanda deche chuge partite ya go chitan sons ani de kan la ya deshe jatan de ani ko 30 khase uzu na anda ta.
So the same receptors that would respond to cold or hot, the same receptors are what are giving the taste or the feeling of hot and cold for capsaicin or for chilies and mint. But that's what's different about them than the 5 other tastants, because the 5 tastants go through the taste system, whereas those go through taste and temperature, which is a completely different modality of sensation.
Ani tanda gi nga su chawa tang chang wa ti ka se na nga su ga ro sor tang de wa res ro ani shen de tin bai na nga su ge ti wa ta ru so ro wa ru so in stam bala kon ro ta kro ko ge ta chwa tha ma ti la nga su ta chawa tang tang wa chwa chi ro wa ti ti ta ani ro nga ti chwa tin se ge ro ta ti sman ro yo res ro ani tanda gi she ta che bai na ru so ti ta ru so ne lam ba ge ru so ma la te la te ru gu du wa ani tanda gi Chongwa tang chawa choya te nga su ru chu ma la ga la ya ane lu gi chi raksha la ten te choya chongwa chi go wa te ni cha yang nyam te chi go re sin stam ba la ya kuran ni ge ta tan che ba ba na chi ta nga su thama ge choya le ya chi go da wa tin tam ba la ya ro to man ro ni yo res.
The active tasting in class was really good. It gave a lot of people a chance to like play around with it, and that made it very interactive, and we thought that was fantastic. And I had found a video. I wasn't going to share it with the group because I figured they might be able to find it, and I didn't want to give something to one group and not to other groups. But I'll share with all of you a video I found about spicy taste that's very well done.
Ngola tanda koso tamse chini kusula dus temes teba bana khashechila te khashechila mateba chona ya yawum duaswa e chela ya tanda yuchute ane chizo chamalu dus ma tegins nyente en te gala ya tanda ngasuge khatsu choya go kogi taksete pe pe ya dus.
And just be very careful when you're talking about mechanism, when you talk about nicotine, that you note to your students that we don't normally make nicotine in our body. That'd be something that we add to our body, like with smoking or something like that. So like nicotine's not just going to be produced by your body, but it comes in
that video. Is that
no, they had a thing about the way that the channel works with calcium.
Okay. Tanda de jinga de je stambala ngasuge calcium ge julam chi orwa odin de je jabu kapse ya ko kandas khashima shitila ya salon chi male Machetela ya chitu nicotine to bejo tang deshas nicotine bana chatanga suga zugu zugu yo maris ti chlok ne yongoris yong batanga su thama thamba tang tu juju yongoris this tambala tigri ti bejo tambala ane ti zabji gores.
And then the last group that we hadn't talked with yet, group number 5 on color blindness.
Da jenda de rukhangawa ngasun dolong kolan decision kusuche.
One of the things that we thought would be good, and do you want to talk about this, Jillian, because that was yours on the colors and how you could have them next to each other?
This would be easier if we had the slides up, and that's another teaching example is instead of talking about it, it's good to show, right? Remember, talk and show is much better.
Da de ngazu kasa de kola ya chi she de baliti tandoge ani chi tanda yo bana nyerndo tan yo bana ne audu wasta de pisando chires.
But you all have good fresh memories, so you will remember that there was an image with 4 different, it had the fruits in there, the reds and the sweet peppers and different fruits and vegetables, and they had that image, and they asked a question to the class about those images if they all look the same.
Da jesulo perchido che chimbana chesulo da tramba yabu yo sang rawa to sta ba ina tramba na sugo chires chesulo perchitan so as perti ga la ya chi perchonchon de shi yo ba je de ga la ya shinto da ngu se de da chonchon da ma da yo chu da ro o de duas.
And then later on in the slide deck, there was an explanation of the 4 different ways to be colorblind, or maybe 3 different ways and the normal, and it was following the same pattern.
Da te kasirwa per shitamba ti tende ta ya kuzu chanta chikin do dum de ke je triwa ani te jela ma yon stambala ya ani chetsula ya nga chun dolong la ya dolong go chonsu segro dolong manda wa nabaga so yo mesum ta shitin de se ja song astan dolong manda ge de se ja ta te ta ani ti ge pangram te ta ni ta de la ya per manda ji chitan yo ro o ti ge pangram te ya ta to desas.
And they map directly onto each other. So it would have been great to show those 2 images either side by side or click one and then the other so that you could see them and you could see how this is how someone with this type of color blindness would view the same image.
Da tanda te ko ansha chi cha chongu yo chang ya mana kuran ji ro chi le chi ila chi yon chi tamba ta ya na chi ga la chi tamba te ji la janda te tamba ina dus chi de ta ne lop la ya ani ko deshe ja te la ya ko ge dolong te rin din dai ba na ne ko ge ta kar sa chonda din na ji ten din na ji la thongre sa chi deshe ja ya ba na ani pe ya ko dus.
But it was a very effective strategy to have that very early, and then towards the end, if your students learned something, they could definitely match back the first thing they saw with the new knowledge that they have.
This tambalaya tanda chetu part in the long to attempt to pay a sons chetu tapo yaporishas. The lotila ten and it to Kutsuga Janu Jelaya, Shisha Sabat Tongua, Ne Shisha Sabat Latin Kutsugi Shisha Sabat Pechu Tangatane, Gangatilaya, Nikarikari Resa Tatarin to touch or this tambalaya, and it teaches to pay Apanashas.
But it was very good.
So make sure you include some assessment pieces at the end to see what your students have learned.
That is the Malaya to Tamatilaya, they'll hope to courage John, you met the Laya Toagichat, and a Jeship in the Kanajagudus.
And you had found some very interesting data that you shared with me before you did your presentation, and I thought you would include it in your presentation, and that was that sometimes when people are colorblind, it has a benefit. So like what you had found was in World War II, that people with color blindness could see through some of the camouflage because they weren't distracted by some of the colors that they couldn't detect differences in. And I thought that was really cool. And I would have included that to say, like, it's not all bad if you have color blindness. There may be some advantages in certain circumstances.
ngutu chi sons ta ngi te mbana chi chu tamshe na yona ya gondu chi good ba yin simbana ti chi chu na mandus ti na tamshe na chu mandus ta ti curricular system bala chi chu ngoma zalla ma chen yo kap sim mbana ta di ya kala na namji she ta nga sun dolong in mbana ko ge chun chan cha shi yor wa ti system bala dolong in mbana ya kula khipen yo pati ko go rong chi re sha sta ti piche sha bana zalla ma chen yo kap sim mbana ta ko dolong in bala ta ne de ta nga chu ta dote zun ru yor wa ताको मगजगने तुजुगु खोई तन राबगन दोते न कोन स्तांबा जेंदा के थंगो यो मारवा एबना तिगे कबस कुछ तेन रो चेगे इम्बाइना या चिन दोलोंग के मीटिंग दोलोंग कुसुम गोको तंत कम दो तिन खिपेन चो योरिस तिन नेतन चिन दुस तंगा इम्बाइना तिगे नेतन ति तंदा गे एने तामचिनातले चिगना अने यागो थंगो दुस
Your instructors had had a conversation about something else outside of class that was similar to that, where we looked at it as a problem that we needed to fix for somebody. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Can you repeat it again?
Yes. So the instructors for different sessions had a conversation during lunch about how sometimes when we see something that's different in the brain for somebody else, like colorblindness or autism, we look at it as a problem that we need to try and fix. But sometimes it has advantages. And so it's not always like it's a deficit that you need to overcome.
Da de kasura kasa ki jinda thini kha chi da par jag pa son te la dus kalo ki che she de shasta ki je de kar shik du se na sam la yang asu ki chi chön putab chön sana dolong do chi thong bai bai na lam sang asu ki ta te ka ta ba na ala dolong re shas ta chön sho de shas ta to zu chi chi gu du sa lam sang ta ti ki gi yores तापर तेरे डो यो मार सांसा बाई बायना या को नेता तेना डो ची बायना या को जुची माजे बाई बायना नेता अंत दुआ ते लाया या को लापी छाता खिफे योरेस.
And that color blindness was a great example of that one.
ना हादिस ता बलाया तांदा देगे चुको तब न्यूआ चों बाई बायना ते लाया खिफन ता गिसन यो गी पिसंग नाने तांदा दोलोंग गी पिसन ति पे याबु चिरेशास.
One more small point. You had in those slides a very beautiful image that had the rods and the cones, and they were color-coded by red, green, blue sensing. Just a quick note to remind your students that in the retina, they don't look like that. So this was, they were realistic. They looked like the cells. They're drawn very specifically, but they had a false color to them. And just to remind, just very quickly, that any images you see that are false colored, that's not how they really appear in the retina.
Handa tanda chisugo yang per tambi kasu ngasu miki tercik jawlo la ya ani lopar ta nyoi gi nilamba yoro nyoi thapon tizu nilamba kusu ani kusu gu chonta manda language tambala chisugo kusu gu chonta tiang mapu tanga jangku tong ombu dus tasha dus this tambala ya loptila kari desija goresana ngone tane miki jawlo la tena do chonta tang me bati nguto chigu yores tema tope ani ngwansu tenga su phandu sta istambala miki jawlo la ya ne kasa nyoi thapon dus je ne kula chonta tena do yo chu yo mares ya ti tiang kusula ya sese chigu ke chambudus.
The interactive piece where we're looking for the numbers as they go up, we thought was really engaging, and we liked that a lot, and I think the class liked doing that a lot.
Hata chechu chego chidro songa dela tenge nalola changa kari chindu se chichi songa listambala ya te pe ya godu ne loptu sunju shichi ya ta ne chi tunal hoya ta tege ne ta shichambudus te pe ya godus.
So those are most of the comments. If you've got other things that you want to ask us about, or if we gave you some feedback and you're not really sure what we were talking about, come and see us. We're happy to explain further.
Ta da nga su da chechu thamsen tri ko la ya ani samchu sha ti cham yes ani ke ti ya chechu la ti ta ya chi khasu ma cha ba da ya chi dra do yo pa ta tong do yo pa ba na ni dro ches nga su ka tu tu la jagos.
But good job, everyone. We like how you are developing as teachers.
Ani sama ya pun sons lapar ta chechu ma wo gigin chi war ta gigin cha go pa sta ba ya te ta di che so la ya chechu ge shu ja go do ti na se ya pun na go dos. Yes, a question.
Yes.
And then social shamba, ginger the drama is a so young. I spent on a ton to woman die. So much you want to do. That is a don't lie or a my country.
Well, I have a question about the color blindness. In some animals like bees or other animals, they don't see the colors as we do. What should we call that situation? Can we call that color blind, or do we call something else for this situation?
So for that situation, you really need to talk about the animal's color reception, because it will be different. So for instance, the bees will see ultraviolet colors that we're never going to see. So the only time it really becomes color blindness is when you have sort of what the average is, what an average person has, and somebody may be missing some of that color that the average person has. It's a really good perspective to keep in mind that other animal species perceive the world very differently from how we perceive the world. Some of these species may have no vision perception at all. But like a shrew, they may have an enhanced touch perception that they can use underground to find their food and move around. There is a researcher who studies underground moles that have this big fleshy thing with lots of tentacles on it that they use to move around, and they can touch and detect things faster than we ever could. And until his work, it was really unclear how it could even be possible.
Earlier we have mentioned other animals have different visions. So for instance, the bees can see ultraviolet radiation. How can we prove, or how can we understand they can see UV rays?
So we have technology that allows us to see ultraviolet by making it a different color that our eyes can see. And we can see some of the things that bees are focusing on and show that they focus on these, and if they're not there on the flower, they won't go for that flower. This is something that makes us a little unique, because we can build this technology to be able to see things that are outside of our normal sense perceptions. What is interesting about that is when we do that with technology, because we use our visual system so much, we don't turn it into a smell. We typically turn it into something we can see. If we were a shark or a rat and we were building technology, we might instead turn it into a smell because we have such good ability to smell and detect differences between smells.
So I'll interrupt here. I say I agree with Michael, but also sometimes we transform a signal into something that we can use. And I know your physics professors have some exciting things lined up for you that may have nothing to do with this, but ask them about signal transduction of ultrasonic vocalizations and other things that you can take a certain wavelength of light and transform it into something that you can actually see. So for example, rats and bats communicate in what we consider ultrasonic vocalization, so we can't hear it. But they are having entire conversations and communicating, but we can change that signal and change it in such a way that we change the frequency so that we can hear it, and that way we can eavesdrop on conversations that rats and bats are having. And whales are also outside of the range that we can hear, but they're on the other side. And so you can take those signals as well and transform them into a range that we can perceive.
Chapter chapter tiga ani dragete desho sana yo paina well ke jagate desho sana yo res ani janda tela yo res ngasu kut kmares istanbalaya ne khu ke jago yo page kete ya ngasu ge tuchi tena pecho tang de tang ngasu kut khya ge lab ge skrota lab ge lab thong ola jur de ta ana dise ola jur de ta ngasu ge kari sheki yo mes skrota kanda do ye mentela ya nyena digres.
So tell your physics professors I sent you.
That is tabalaya ane kasa jela ya chesu income sari gela la twa tang tabalaya ne ge ngarangi twa ti tu triga tang song la rochis.
그다음 내단데 대치적으로 됐어. 그래야 말은 네가서야 양 심하게 뜻주한테 말은 땅이야 수술이야 주게 그 손을 대지로. 디니가서 레비기야 다른 저 주게 네가게 아니 생롱자가 레비 차시 대다 남중문에야 지 주니 감도주의는 거네 주니 디니가서 레비 생롱자 등이라 잡아 요요만. 기지대대.
My question is in our dreams, sometimes someone just poke you with a knife or needle, you feel the pain, and that neurocircuit is activated, and you can feel that pain. And also in a real life, if you poke you with a needle, you can feel the pain. Is the activation of the neurocircuit different in these two cases?
I think I'm going to answer a different question from what you asked. If this helps, let me know. If not, I'll try again. But I'm attempting to answer what I think you are asking, but through a different way. So when you are asleep, your brain waves are a little bit different. But you're still in charge of all the same sensations that you normally would feel. So the thalamus is that relay center that receives all the information from your sense organs except for olfaction. The thalamus receives all of that information. When you're asleep, your eyes are closed, so light information is not going to be coming in. But your smell and touch are still perfectly intact. When you are sleeping, the thalamus generates some rhythms that prevents the full effect of the sensory experience from getting to your cortex. So if I normally would be able to say, Tenzin, wake up, it's not going to work. I have to be louder in order for that auditory signal to get through into your awareness.
That is tambala namji baina ani ta tenzin ya se long la baina tinano baina chi kuyo baina ku chi se kuyo baina ani ni kupi kapse baina ani lebu ki ka ge za ani ku nga sugi ta ka sugi tan du shi chi goro ala nga ke tang du se du shi chi goro o ti ni let ki yo mares ti leba chi ala ya ke tis chambu jab chi ke tang gu yo res.
In the same way, if someone touched you while you were asleep, it would have to be a more firm touch. The intensity of the signal has to be higher in order for it to reach to the level of awareness.
That in the Chongone and a chiki chorangala Nikuka Sulapachi Chambaina, the uncle Chaya de the Namjim Bana Chambaina, I should to Shishiko, Chanson Segura, Apagarason say, Imana Nikupi Kapsu, Rabati Laya, and this Shishamumara Bana, and then I should let your Rason say again to Shitishit Maris.
This is true for all the senses except for smell, because olfaction does not go through the thalamus first. Therefore, all the smells are at the same intensity that they would be if you were awake.
다 대가를 내가 수그 왕서 젬바다 젬바 참마 잡고요. 레스타 마잡사대가 수그 드설다 잡고요 말이스. 드설대가래서나 드설대 단다 레부 주진 누구 너가 누구요 마시자 드설체고 말이스. 다 드설대가서 니 드디 주서하시거라. 대니 쿠마콘 시치고 시장 레스고 쳐야 돼.
So that's how the brain handles external stimuli when you're asleep. It filters it down to a lower intensity, and then you can still experience it, but it has to be greater in order for you to feel it for external stimuli.
Tistambalaya tat titing asuga lepangune chilola yombigi ane chi kuchin chi orwati ngizin chi tante res. Tistambalaya kuge ni kupi kaps lepagi tanda chilona yonjuga dati kaza da ku tsanda uchi japchi ne shuchinti taktal hegi chi mecha ane chi choya gitinda shuchin shuchambu hegu yo paimbaina tampu gita kuchinti shuchambu gugu res.
Now if I asked you to imagine a sound, you could imagine that. You would start by creating that imagery or that in your cortex. So you can start by thinking about something, and you can have that perception of that feeling. You can imagine being cold, you can imagine pain, all of those things you can create in your own head.
다 대단 차서 권을 왔다 들었는데 당아서 같이 그래서나 아니 졸라 지지쇼 미지쇼세 지지쇼세 나도 제발 만나 지금 삼루나 삼루땅쇼세 만나 땅트고요레스 비셔샤바이나 지게 주미 개땅바딜라 삼루땅쇼세노 되나도 만나 담보티 당아수게 가수그레다 지지쇼세 들라바나 덩거와 대점발라데 당아술라야 지금 들라던 비긴 용화동 소할해 지어와 어때 용 짓고요레스 레피나네 텐트고요레스.
So the cortical activity when you are dreaming looks just like when you're awake and having that experience. So
tadanga ni kupi kapse lepi relation ona ya ko ge jeguchi ndugo yorwa ni kupi ge kapse ge lepi ge nana druwi ge lepi relation ona druwi ge jegute ene tadanga su ge ni sepi kapse samlo tangna chi dugo wa ote tang chi pares.
So if you have a dream that you're looking at something green and then you are stuck by a needle, the cortical activity associated with that will look just like if you had it in real life.
This tambalaya ane tanda ane kupi kapsa ane chiga jangdok ke sachi tuando ta ane kabita utsupa imbaina chiga tanda lepigulation on the shegu chijongorwa ode jombadi ane ngasugi tongis chiga tuwa tangi swat chiparis.
So you will feel or experience the same thing in your dream that you would from an external stimulus.
That is tambalaya ane kasugurida ngasugi choa sukurwada ngasuga malam kanane the choachi orwa shilok malam nane choa ti tong ngisunga so ane shigi kuchin chila tane choachi orwa ti tachi paris.
Does that help?
The land which teswise hand which toswise.
Two other ways to sort of address what I think you were asking about is when you meditate, one of the things you may do is check around your body and see how your body is in the meditation.
Tati yang titandawa elensia ba bana chetu gom nyamlenchi yukase bana gom tijabi kapsa tampu telaya ane ji rupu ki chashi su kanada yo mete kolaya ngasu samlatang ko yorwas.
Your touch sensors are sending signals that you're sitting down.
Tata de ngaso rakso nilamba imbaina ta chu gom jobi kapsa rakso nilamba de karchi goresana ane chorama de desha se age ane dati ya tangi ores.
But until you direct your attention to that, you're not consciously thinking, I'm sitting, and there's pressure on my bottom. So you're not thinking, I'm sitting, and there's pressure on my bottom. Like you're not aware of that signal that's being sent.
Imbaina de kapsa ta chu ma de yorwa de pati choku yorwa imbaina ya katimbane te kola samla tanga yo maris nga ma so de nga katimbane tanda ma so de yes nga so de tiga roksor ge dating ila pana yungu yo sete samla tanga maris ina so de bate chor so gorwa tanga sung gorwa.
Unless something changes about that, kind of like if there's more pressure or something like that, you're not going to be aware of that unless you focus your attention on that.
Taya de patenga suga namje samuna shi tanga marwa siya tate kati tanga reses tambalaya ne kulaya chenjwa do chithe pata ya na te gatel no shu chembu chhe paina te kapsanga suga samlu ti ga tangarwa ta odis tambalaya te kapse kulekrma to ne shenda nga su ti gatel tapar sam tong dik mares.
You may also experience things like that with pain. If you have pain and you're focusing your attention on it, you may feel it more than if you've had it and it's been there for a while and you focus your attention on something else.
Ta teta chi song one ke te chong la pa ge ta chi zu cha shi chi la ya chi na zu do chu yo pa ba na ya chi ta ti ga samu tang de ba na ta ya ku ka sa shu turn ru do chu chen bu chura do chi yong gres ro ta kari ta tru pa na sa na ne chong la na su ti tis chong ga la jurong pa chi de en ba na chong ga mu se te jenda chi la mu ko pa na ti kap sa na zu chura yong gres ne ti ga le to par ti ga mu de pa na ya na zu te shu chen bu chura yong gres.
When I was little, I was walking and I stepped on something sharp and I felt that sharpness, but then I didn't really feel the pain after that.
Ta ga chong chong be kap se dus ka ba je be kap se chi chalo no bu chi ga tele dus ka pa chu sons ra imba na ti kap se chi chau do ka naz do chi chor sons ti je la ya ne ko zung do ya chor ma sons.
Until I looked at it and I saw that it was bleeding and then I felt the pain again.
Ta tampo ko su bar wa ti kap se chi cha sha chi jana ma shi chi na zung do chi chi chwa ti le ma sons ta na ge chwa ti le ma sons ane ti ge je la ya dus ka ba ya cha ta sta ba la ne ko thoi wa da zu thong ro des ta ba la ta ga su ge ta chi na bi su ko na zu chwa ti shu chen bu chi sons.
So where you are focusing your attention can affect how much those signals are getting to your thinking part of the brain.
This tambala chorong ge ko chi la ya tu no te mate te la te ne dete ani changwi ti ton de wi ge ani chat ti chorong manglo chi chorong ge la pan ndu mandu la ya ani shu chi to ge res.
And one other example, there are people who no longer have their arm, and sometimes they will feel pain in that arm that isn't even there, because the signals are being sent, but the arm is not there to have that pain.
Ta sam la kan ngol la na nga su ge lokpa me pa imba na ya lokpa ge chashi te la ya nazu chonga ge chwa le ku yo sme khashila karisla ko pandal yo ko yo mar wa imba na le pe na la ya lokpa ge chashi te la ya nazu chonga ge datil he ge yo res.
They call that phantom limb pain because there's nothing there, but they feel pain for where that would have been.
Ta te la ya phantom limb pain le ko ta te nga su khari chi jo yo na nga su ge ombo ma se ko na ta nga su ge ta yamna yan la ta pa wa ge singo do chi re ta yo ma res yan la yo ma re yamba na yan la te ga la ya ani sungo te so go yo res.
And it's because of the way the pain circuitry is firing, the neurons are firing and going to the brain.
Ti ga la ra le res system bala nga su na zu cho ya ge ani dating lamti wa julamti lika kandanda uchi chi yo metela ra le go res. Yes, you have a question? Da da nga su ge de la ya che gu thama chi dra yes ti matu mo na che sla tra ayo sa.
가르창 디 잔전시 송송아 당보 접생각돼 잔전시 때 건강하냐 편지를 그 잔전시 편지를 그 잔전시스리 당보 접선 저디든지 송송
편지를 봐 걸라서
잔전시 때 가냐 근데 가르창 디양 항상 차리 그 징이스 거노 징이 말인데 다가 항상이야 잔전시 치더니 니 가르창 기억하던지 처음부터 전에 요샤 제클라가 지금 땡키지에라서
어디 되도와 요샤 때단도 되셔 되시 다다데 가사 산자데데 징이라서 펜질라 Hallelujah. And in the first session, we have mentioned about the 4 principles of evolution due to natural selection. Do you remember we have
That was mine. Yeah.
And he's asking what are the 4 principles. And the second question is you have mentioned about this, and he wants to know the 8 core concept. And I told him that is on the board.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you want to go over those?
Sure.
And then I'll move into...
Yeah. So why don't we pull it up and we can...
Easy
So,
to get to.
yeah, I think it's easy to get to, but I can just say, so you're going to have more genetic diversity and more individuals than you need to carry on the species. And some of what you see is heritable, which means it can go from the parents to the offspring. And there are traits that are better for animals to be able to survive and reproduce. And those are the ones that make it, that live to survive and reproduce and pass on those genes, those traits to their offspring.
La pembigi ani ku cheshitina do yoresta cheshitila tenideti ani chinguti matutu chuni chiatna jipechit kore tila tenideta tila pembigi cheshicigorwa ani tiku jipechigres.
And over time, because those are passed on, those are what you see in future generations.
This tambalaya tandagi cheshigiritina do ku ani rapchimatela ya jipechigi yotsa. Ani rap chama la taba imbana ani kusuna la ya ani cheshite to yores.
Okay.
Okay, so are you going to put it up or do you need to?
I don't think I need to. Yeah.
Okay. I actually want to ask you to do a quick exercise.
Do you want to use this? I think it's not working.
This one is working.
Yeah,
No?
you need to talk like this, otherwise it's not working.
Are you going to
Alright.
do an exercise with this?
Yeah, that's working now.
You can change it for now because they'll
Okay.
take a few minutes.
Because I
Okay.
could bring out the, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. But I don't have your slides, so it wouldn't be.
Yeah, he already
But I could pull
mentioned.
them off of the classroom is what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. At the end of our time together, we have about 1 hour left. I would like to review what was very significant for you during this week.
Ta tanda nga su karsa nga su chotang sikura tan zanda te chochi ani thama chis ma shil ham dus te rang la ya che chula ani jeshi chi ya yins jeshi chi ya de la ya nga su once century trip up su ta che chula ya ji gengang chi bu thong ya chi wa wa ti ka ri thong song se ti yins.
This is neither a formative nor summative assessment. This is a check for us.
Ta te ka ri yins na de nga su ge jundeng ge jeshi chi la mes tim dang jen chodon jeshi chi la mes te ka ri yins na ne nga su la su gor da ge nga su ge ka ra do chi chin do mu du te ta ge che te yins.
So I would like to ask you to, in your notebooks, it's fine, or actually, I would like to collect them. So if you will be able to take out a page from your notebook, I would like for you to draw or write at least one thing that you learned and will never forget, or something that you knew before and now you think you know it better.
Ta tanda che chu rite na tro chis ran rite na ne shogo ching gan tro chis shogo te dus thama te la dugi ins wa kare chiro chis kare tro chis na ane ta tanda di diga na la ya ani chu ga jang sha ju ga wa sa chen ri ke ju shi shi ta pa ka no chin ba na tangi chi jang yin sro di shi son sta di ne to de tangi me si ka za temba je sa mare sa chi na ti na degree sro na jang yin de da temba je sa mare sa de na do ge ne to chi na degree yang na kari na degree se na ngoma ngi chi she shin ge yes sro nan tan da ni kab la ya ti ge ko pe ya pu shi son ting sa pu shi son se ge tin da do chi na de dus.
So you have options. You can either draw or you can write.
That's just like damka yores remote na degrees and igina na degrees.
And you can either describe something you didn't know before that you know now, or something you knew before that you know more.
Taya ngoma ma shochi tanda sawa shochi ko ida dikore yang na ngoma tis yoche rwa ani tanda tili da ju shwas gorwa otina china dikdus.
If you cannot find anything that you either know more about or that you learned, please draw or write something you wish you learned this week.
Ta ketis tinado chi trame ba na ro ngoma ge ma shio chi talu tanda shio chi tang ya na ngoma tis shio chi tanda tung se pu shio chi ge ni to tinado chi trame ba na ani chorang ge rindo la ya ale dinda do chi tang ye tanda chi jang yo na ta ta yin sa ma chi go ro ta su su do pa la yo pa ta shi na chong shi yo na ta ta yin sa nga su do pa na chi go ro wa o tinado chi ko la ya ne remote na degree ya na yige la ko na dus.
That includes anything your instructors presented to you, any exercises we did together, or anything any of your classmates may have taught about.
Hadati baina chesu kari ko ina landiku ore swa ngasu ma ngoto chiwa ina dikore ngasu shegu khadri kapsu china dikore tina singi chesu ge de rokaje na samagandu sinzende trechi tamse chi orwa tigo ko ina degrees.
It can be a fact, a skill, a concept, or a resource.
Tati karina degrees swa ngasu ge denton chi baina dikore ani cell chigina degrees tina singi tanga suge jucha sugro da tunchen chigina degrees. What is that the one skill resource fact
concept
ayana nga suge koto chigina degrees.
Now resources can be things like that worksheet we used. A resource might be Mouse Party we told you about. Those are also resources that you learned about this week. You can write about that or draw about that.
That tension system bala resources tambala yang asuge natong khachi pisha yo ro tanda one is say mouse
Party.
video chitando tanda video chitanchi chimba. The other one
The worksheet we used in class.
Nga asu zanda na ne dich peche tang yo remove peche tang yo ro o tinna do imba na yang asuge resource na tension consider ku yores.
Or that circadian rhythm website with the flies and the proteins.
Tina singa asuge tinjung kondu chigora tinjung kondu tan debe ge yang taja chitowa na butang tan do taja chigora tina degrees.
So I'd like you to take 5 minutes to do that exercise, and then we'll talk a little bit about it to hear where there is synergy and where there's difference, and then we'll also have an opportunity to reflect on any additional questions you might have on details.
Tanda te kamanga gana chuzu trochis kamanga tunu jela ya ne ko chitmon ta kari chindu ta ya tamo maimba kari chindu te tagins ro te jela ya ne yang suge ta just samatan devige ya chik twa thepan ro yo ba na te lan jagins.
5 minutes, draw or write.
Kamanga yes remote na degree igit na degrees.
I'm just so loud, I thought it would be fine. Oh, for the recording. Okay, got you. Okay, thanks.
Add that website on Smell.
Is it hosted by Wall Street Journal?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that one is, everybody can access, they can access it.
It's free to access, so I think so, yeah. I mean, I don't know if it'll always be free, but at least right now it is. The other sort of nice thing about that is it connects you with other stuff that they've got on science, which is kind of cool. So like this is episode 26, but they've got like sound therapy, they've got weight loss drugs, things like that. Trying to think what some of the other videos were that they had a Wernicke's.
About 1 minute left. Okay. Do you need some more time or are you okay? Okay. Did anyone draw? Yes? Good. Most people wrote. Did you write about something that you knew before and now you feel like you know some more about it? Who is that? Who wrote about that? Yes? Please share. What did you know a little before and you think you know some more now?
In the first sessions, you have mentioned about how our brain complex is.
Yes.
Is complex, and you initially used the analogy of a city about that, and then you talk about that is not enough because we have trillions and billions of neurons and the connections. That thing really informed me a lot about the complexity of the brain.
Right. Very good. Thank you. Now that's an exercise we all did together. Yes. I'm making a point about that because as people talk, sometimes the thing you learned may be what you researched for your group. So you may have gotten something that nobody else got because you spent time studying it so that you could teach it. Anybody else want to describe something that they improved on? Yes.
Yes, as Michael have mentioned earlier about our presentation about the color blindness, we mainly focus on negative consequences, but Michael reminded us the positive thing that we find online. Also, as we work on that project as a group, what we found out is that color blind is not. Color blindness is not a bad thing all the time. It has good consequences as well. We find a lot of good consequences on the net about color blindness.
Excellent. Thank you.
Tushis,
Hey, did other people write about something that they learned new for the first time? Or a different way of doing things?
Real pure again. Ventral, lateral, pre-obstacle again. Talo sasa again again. Dikola tangazo di presentation shoda again. This was the nita dikola tos kalota di une ni da doyo ata digira kol ni to sa position.
Kangitan doyo ba?
Ni ya.
Ni kwa real pure that is a new thing that I learned from our group presentation of group work, and I learned that there's a essential part in and important for our sleep.
Very good, very good.
Very all those. Yeah, that's what can jam. Gap junction side gap junction usually, like when we learned about the signal between synapses, we learned that in a neuron it goes in the action potential or in electric signal, and we have the chemical signals in the synapses. And this time I learned something new that even electric signals can pass from one neuron to the next, I think through gap junction. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yep.
There's something new that I learned this time.
Yes, and that came out of the drawing exercise for neuroplasticity, something that you probably thought you knew everything about already.
that thing also once again yenshi tang devi kola remote because libraries ngasim bana ta chichi baina ya aleta once again yenshi courses tambala ya ta sama shingu gondo yores gondo kores imbaina ya ti paro tela ngasu don ju chi wata tanda ge ti dire do workers parts gap junction de odus yon ju res.
So when you are teaching basic fundamentals, you give the most general version of things. And as you get deeper into it, you get an opportunity to see that there are some exceptions, and this was the time where we were able to get the exception to that synaptic transmission rule.
That's again banang asuga chitangi shisha motor chipikap sim banang asuga chichapki the yontrake the tantin de jaguores that is tambalaya chigi motor chipikap sang asuga chichapta yonchap within de jaguores imbana tanda de kapsa asuga the cheta pachi janche ko ting sapula ju kapsa asuga thamong yepata imbachi thamong mai bigine tantina de jayangores te tanda picha shabana tanda asuga the purchase sa gap junction sa te yang ko ge ta onsa thamba ge onsa ni ge paro ge da tong tang ge yang ko karsugre ta chepe wa ji ruwa oti dus paro te le dus.
If I had put slides together, I would never have thought to put gap junctions in, but when we were drawing, someone made the comment that someone drew axon to axon, and that's not how things work, which gave an opportunity to bring up the new information.
Hata ngara imbanal honse tadu chibi kapse dus loto nyeri tinendo tadu chibi kapse dus ta chi ona tanda ge te partsik sa chigora partsik gap junction te partsik te na chuksa mares ibai na tang asun dus trito chi on stambala ti ko la kanas datang go res remote on stambala ya ta triti ta barwa ta stambala mij ka ale khoge dashi saten ka parola ya dreto shaja to shadu satira no yong mare sabba to an ten de tang asuge partsik sa ti korti tudil has was.
So the collaboration was important because we passed that drawing around, so we got to see more than one person's idea.
That is Tambalanga Suga Nyamli said the kitchen which Agores, Nasuchi, but it's Hamadus Taz Tambalaya, and Tangasulaya, Rayati, Susugi, Tatsam, my Mijenda, Tatsukari, Guyopayama, Gutskuyores.
Thank you for that.
The two chase
Gindo,
Adela
Gindo, Kazan de Rumulabi Gensto again. Rumulabi Gensia, Mogi, Tanadi, Rumilamni, some should pay dog again. Some shows to the remote tea on the city, get some shows tea soon again. What do you call it? Lord Washington again.
And get this about he's asking the paper published by Anne Fink,
yes.
And think about the learning neuroscience through drawing. Is that he's asking for that paper
So
if it's
two
possible?
things not to be confused. Anne Fink was the reviewer for the paper written by Meena Balgopal and Anna Edlund, who taught the nuns. So in the peer review process, Anne was the reviewer for that paper that was published in the ETSI special issue.
Dada ge de la khase chizu go dus tanda Anne Fink la de ne sobaputi mai bache somi la ya ti tikasa shikasa shita tani chigorata Tires, the Sobopus race is Tambala again Mina Yoga, the Tresma again, Mina Valcopata, the Tigasachula, Kotsulaya, Onsa Sendit Casa, Chingu Senditini, Tiva, Casa, and Iowa, or Koranigi Trishajuchi race. True at the Danga, so ever to put Sendit Leram Gananolo Laya, and they could Casa Musegi, Tatuke, Tepchiton, or some bit in a question race.
Anne published a paper in our academic journal for neuroethics about Frans Fanon, who is an Algerian physician who had some questionable patients that he was trying to figure out how he could treat.
Tanda engi toyati gela tanda ngasotini gela tigi toyati ka resistam bala mogusum chi toyore tanda pune amji chike ne kasugureta the nepa yan sambusuko the nepa this mano tindalaya kanado chige ani chuthap tangu yona mena se ti korgi som chitriore ti tanda gela kusu gitu tanda once a Henry Tandevi Kunchu says you are to take on to your race.
Thank you for the reminder to share both of those documents in Google Classroom.
That and the Tenisha, Jomitan Kutochirochi said, Transalon to chase the Tanda Tenisha as Google in the Dutch or Tina Chukins.
Anything else that you have learned?
Cousin Gingi Tidanji, the Tidan detail line, and Gingi some Shajima Tamson. The Semyon the Chamber said. Some should be some should be known in the Sosha di Chazan Jilochu, Chazan Sebo Sechu, Digela, Sosha de la Pabin around the Tajikari to be in search. The tradition teachers. They pay to know them as Johnson.
For me, you presented us a research paper about emotion and memory,
yes.
And you let us read the abstract,
yes.
And discuss about that, and asked us how we would do,
yes.
the investigation or the test. So that really helped me to learn more.
Very good, thank you. That one of the really important concepts is, as many of you are researchers now, thinking about how to ask a good scientific question.
That's it. So, Manchishigi and the Nyamshichi was this Tambalaya, Nyamshigi, Nani, Ketchishiko, the Ketchambuchika races Tambalaya, and it's Henry Tandrevigi, that's Henry Tata Tandrevigi, Troya Puchikandas Tangure said in the Ketchamburis.
So, it's a practice. It's a practice to know how to ask a good scientific question. There are many things that can go wrong with a scientific question. So the variables to consider and all of these things, it's practice. So as you invite your students to think about what the researchers have published, give them some time to think about how they would have done it first.
This Tambalaya and it's Henry Kitua, Sakura, Senator Tambikitua, the Laya, John Derish, Guyorista, Senator Tambalaya, and the Kolaya, Nutrition, Sure, Gita to call Talman Masona, Shorton Mampuyoris, Tins Tambalaya, and Tins Tambalaya, Luptusula, Kusula, and the dinner chicken, Tina Kutuchi, Kusulaya, and the Telaya, Takship Diak, the Tuakana, which Tansares, Telaya, and the Luptucho, John the Chichi, the Kitchen Boris, and the dinner Gita, Sanri Tantambi, Troya, Puchitangalaya, and John the Mampunanguyoris.
So in that worksheet, there are two opportunities because there are two papers that you can stop and ask, what would be a good experiment if you want to test this question? That worksheet also includes a prompt that asks, what are the most important comparisons if you are going to see if the experiment worked? So that's also another good practice. What are the comparisons that make sure you understand that this idea you had worked or didn't work? Excellent, thank you.
Yes. Cyclic rhythm, when you talk about the cyclic rhythm, you combine that with a story about the women, and when you explain something with the story, and you also have mentioned, you have also have graphs that shows normal and then dysfunctional cyclic rhythm looks like. And in that way, it's really helpful to understand that concept easily when you have a story to tell with the concept.
Perfect, thank you. So that news article about the athlete who spent time in the cave underground and she thought it was a shorter time, that's a really great way to think about what our circadian rhythms are doing. Yes.
nguni dana mabung gorde ora this tambala di kapsanga suge lugi te tunjung khorlu chi orwa ti kola nguto chi baina ani tanda ge chapana tombe ge soshon de bana ko pisum pe yabustus.
Since we're on that, does anybody remember what hormones are high at night and which hormones are low at night?
That dana ga sunde ko sistema chi sistema suge de stanga so ani kubi kapsur wa ani kubi kapsa ani menji chorwa menji mangbu mangbu yoba menji karkare yana nyonyo yoba menji karkare yoris.
Pop quiz, high at night.
Gonda mangbu yoba.
Melatonin. So that's why many of the faculty are taking melatonin, because we need to trick ourselves into thinking it's night.
Melatonin mangbu yore this tambalan del penyi ge gigem bana mampuchi gitan the melatonin gonda nyaukaso gonda melatonin the sagi or iskachila baina masu karchi resena masu tapon lata gonda re nyare shazi ko that te guyores.
What's low in the night? What should be low in the night?
Kari nywa yo gugures gonda baina. Serotonin?
Serotonin, that wasn't on my list, but why do you think serotonin? Oh, you're talking about in sleep. Yes. Serotonin should be low during sleep, but I'm just talking about at nighttime. The stress and sleep group, or emotion and sleep, and you talked about sleep fragmentation, you should know that if cortisol is high in the nighttime, it's hard to fall asleep because cortisol should be low.
Samgeta ani samyong kola decision should time go rest tanda ani tadanga sumenjena ne cortisol chora cortisol te mambu yo baina ani chetu nyita te ko kechen stambala ya nyinga suge ton cheba tenda ku kuresege wa stambala ya ne gonda ani chege baina cortisol nyonyo go yo res ne baina cortisol mambu cha sona ni ku yo mares.
Right. Any other ideas, concepts, skills, resources?
Jambayos tanda digita ko tore sere ni karsugure tinchela soba. Initially, like before this today's presentation, I have thought that yesterday's presentation, I've thought that the spiciness of chili or the taste of the mint, I always thought that is a test. Yes. And with this presentation, I still have the doubt is as a sensation or somatic sensation or test. It gives me this doubt feeling. I still need to investigate to decide what it is really is. But it's really good to know. Good to know that obviously I think is correct. Is not so.
Yes. So sometimes we have to challenge what our intuition tells us. So you taste it and it feels like you're tasting it. But then we look at the neuroscience and it says this is working through our somatic senses. So yes.
That the Taranja, Sansa Bana Suchi, Shasha, Telayanko, Karsugre, Donglanda, which you go to Swakola, the Pisha Shabana, and the dinner do things to Kasaudan, dinner do in Bana, Namji, Banagasuita, Russo Re, Samgu or Wahimbana, once a Sanric Litsula Taba in Bana, Kurusurgi Litsumula, Chigo Marawanga, Sugulsurgi, Rakshatrachi or what Mula chicken to us.
Anybody else want to volunteer something that they learned? Yes?
Mukawande.
Stop it. That was not meant to translate. Thank you.
Ngado session tanda gingi kazangi mazenda labdu ane ta suzuki gang sheba di chigo mai ba lobdu ki gang gare singi research ora dila donan che go gare ta suzuki assumption dila to donan chigi che go research ora jema do ngajo ge suzuki gang sheba dagarang ke doje ni lobdu la thia tabji chwa na samsam di to kabu chegi
for me what was something I learned is at the beginning of the class, you have mentioned that we don't, as a teacher, we shouldn't make any assumptions in the class. You don't always teach what you have prepared, but you need to ask the student and know their background and then teach accordingly. So that is really good reminder for me as a student or teacher in the future.
Yes, thank you. So that first session where I went over some of your old slides, just to remind you that the difference between an expert and a novice is that you assume many things. So because you are familiar with the content, you're an expert, you forget that you have to go into detail about something. So that's a very important part, to stop and remember what your students do not yet know.
That the pay abolis tanda ngasu so tanzina tampu the trip comes ani kasugor the kebata ani the search loma in bana keber kariyo mete kondese jasha yuswa the kapse ba tangasu mambu system bala the chitanga samutashi insha search or one etante chungu yores the and kuyo marista in bana ko Chorangi Sheba Kanshila Hotu Meshibate, Mambo Yoretins, Tambalaya, Paraparolaya, Netiati, some Shagashagi Loptu, Netangano Imbate, Julon Chikichia, the kitchen brace. Jambayos, Akazoba.
Kazama the Chetun Jureji analogies. On the Neanzo the Karsa. Penaleba doji samadana di Chetun Jurella and di Kecho down di and Malala or color that the Keber Mambojila Sanotan, Tensutanguda Anger. Odina Yabush.
For me, the analogy of the brain has been a really beneficial one, because when we do the analogy exercise, we need to think about the structure and the function in detail to make to create the analogy example.
That brain analogy activity allows you to bring up many different concepts at any level of neuroscience. So that's also a really strong one. So yes.
Res talanga sugi alepa gi chetung bitsun sha chorwa istambalaya atgarang res ta piche shapanati kapsa ngasugi ta ku pitsu mambusha gor pitsun shan istambalaya lepa tan drevige neluta ko che thumbu ta che thuma person yopegen eta mambuchi shingu yores.
I'm going to just quickly show you a couple more resources. But if you have anything that you want to add, feel free.
Well, one more. That one more teachers. That the agenda.
And the answer to the Rukani in Rani singis la ni singing the Madani Chasons. Ruka Dumbadan, Ruka Gubani, and the Nigi that singing those la. And I want to give Quigay Chabadan, and Tamatagi, Yalingi, Quigay Chabe, never Jilanis to Shira. Kunshibegi, Shibi never, Lebig Tanzinchi, Shibi never Tijado. The Shibi never blabber in anyone sitting, but the Tamatana will in Shirves.
Shibi never send a conscious stage like that.
No. Lebigi, Shibi never.
group number 7 and 9, we presented on sleep, and when we define sleep, we have two different ways of defining the term sleep.
Yes.
For them is less activation Ra, and for them they mentioned about Shivi Nipamas, it's like conscious stage to Ra.
No.
So in a neuroscience, do you think is a conscious stage as a definition for sleep, or?
That's an excellent point to bring up. And just a reminder that you will not always have a full agreement for certain complex topics. So there are certain concepts that are so difficult that even neuroscientists don't agree on the definition every single time. So when I teach the full semester class on sleep, in the first week of class, I have students work together to come up with an operational definition of sleep. I don't give them the definition. We work together to come up with something that we can all agree on. And there are some things that must be present in the definition, and then in other years, people add things that other groups don't have. And so there's a little bit of movement or possibility for things like sleep and pain and love and happiness.
Tatina Shaka Kosuga Tampuchi, Tenichi Shagrua, Tatila, Yankulu, Jima, Stambalaya, Tenitinatele, Takutangwaji Sangarwa, Tatigantele, Kanonja, and Ayungore, Speech Shabana, Nitawata, Nazutawata, Stiwatawata, Tenado Imbana, Yanko Tenitelaya, Tachiku, Luri Lurijin, the Yankula, Kanonja, and Juratan, and Tatina Yungudus.
Okay, so we are running short on time. I just wanted to remind you. Oh, was there another question? Yes, yes.
Shomi something jo. Lava te shomi something gani teach la tati sambala. Azu yichiga ta ina po na ta na manda samdwa. So ti shote ane jima ga lobsana te smombo yo ina azu yichiga tati sambala sho somni tati sambala manda tongdwa. Sho chini rambo nda sho chini tongdong da te tongdwa. Te sonza ane karere te ane mombo ji te dina jima ga lobse kapsa thitoina. Yang laba te la yang azu ta sho te la yang jiro dos kres.
Some request, rather request which when we have Jeremy to show the 3D picture of the brain, is something new that we are learning, because when we see that when we look at the 3D picture of the brain, we see when we have x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis, we see totally different three set of pictures.
Yes.
And it's something something new experience for me, and for the next years, if we can include more of this, I will feel more comfortable to look at the 3D picture of the brain and distinguish which part is which.
Wonderful, thank you. We really want you to be able to use these apps as you're teaching, and Jeremy is currently making videos that can show someone how to use it. He's already done some in English, but he is planning to do it with a Tibetan translation, so that you don't have to wait until next year when we come back. You'll be able to start using it at your monasteries soon.
Ahanda tanda de kalana nyenchi de pecho tanda ke chembre tanda ge Jeremy baina ani tanda chechula temba ti chela ya ku ge na de pecho kandastang ge me ti ko la ya ku ge nyen thon chi zu ta khashi chi chabares ti chela ya ku chashi kar tang du la na ani pupa ge ke ju chi ta nyam ta ni ko nyam ta nyen thong na tle pe ke te ken cha yo pa chi de te dus ta chashi tang dus ne pecho tanda ge ta ta ni ta ta ba na lu ji ma pa gu gu ma dus ne ke chu kan jonjo ani te nyenchi tu pecho tang tang poi ten chi chana na yo pa je zu gomba na la kan jonjo pecho tang yong tsares.
So on the first day of class, I mentioned that we were using 3 of the 8 core concepts from the Society for Neuroscience to orient our study for this week.
Hada nga chu ni ma tang bo de la ya wan sa chen ke ju shi kan ro chi ga sha me ti nga chu wan sa chen ke cho de ku chu ge tembe ji we ge ani ku to ke chen bu je sa chi wa o ti na ne sum ga la ya nga chu ge mu sin gi ba ti shu yes.
And I'll just remind you that I got these from the Society for Neuroscience has outlined some standards for their high school education, but it's the idea that there are certain things that anyone who is studying neuroscience should understand. So it doesn't matter that you can read it, but there are 8 different concepts that are listed here. And as you can see, the matrix has so many different ways that you can approach any of these topics.
Kuto nyambu segur wada teta te pala ya labya la ya ani kandas labe yo kandas ndese jaga yo research gorwa thapsi tam tentang te mando yo bade dulas ndese jasha dus.
No, the other direction. No, sure. Go down here. Scroll. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so these core concepts you can see are organized here on the Society for Neurosciences Education website, and all 8 of them are here.
Ahanda tanda kuto sabi kuto kitchen je chi orwa te ba na kusu de la ya ane ayo chi de tanda kusu ge taja ga ko shadus.
So what topics Michael and I selected are relatively arbitrary within these general themes.
Ahanda tanda ngarani ge de la moto chi ju de ane chi chebu ge ko ge
So for the genetic foundation of the nervous system, I selected circadian rhythms so we could talk about clock genes, but you could have done anything else under that category. Genetic
okay.
foundation of the nervous system.
Ta wansa Henry kita tenshi chibige tisgurwa rigzi tripcha chigurwa ti kola system balanga suge de tunjun kholu kola de sejab chi tusmuto chiores chetsu bana janda ti ko trip bana yang ko tenana janda tenado muto chi chi thamal hesatel he yores.
So just a reminder that you should feel empowered to cover content in any area as long as it goes back to some overarching principle that forwards and advances neuroscience education.
This tambalaya ani chesuge kasatanga chu wansa charite ko ta jita ta sugro atigen kuto che cheta tembe chi shajuge ta josha jachembo khasduga otila ya thamal hege ne chi kasugre thomsentina do theba imbaina ne chesu chi dangchu gane thina digiores.
There's so many topics within neuroscience, it's impossible to cover them all, but we can start to pick up patterns and processes if we pick out things that are relevant.
That once a second, I Joshamas on a hatch and Mambu, or is so much retail maris, Ibanaya, then I sit on the oil sugar, and a cook, a gentle toyanda utang, and let your pattern or
So I know there was a question that Michael wanted to answer, and so I'm going to turn it back over to you. Is there something else? No? Okay. All right. So you want to just wrap up then? Yeah? Okay. All right. So, my mistake. So, as we have completed that, please don't feel as if you cannot reach out to us. Please feel as if you can reach out to us if you want clarification or support on anything that we have covered or that you have covered for yourself.
Tan draw juga topan ro ne dino yo pai bai na ane nga so la ya kati na ya draw chi na degree sa te ane gong chis.
So as items came up, I'll have to remember to go and make them available for you in Google Classroom. You can continue to use that as a resource for collecting all of the things that we talked about this week.
That nga so David don thang de na te le ngoto chi ju ge ne tong kha chi orwa te tan draw te ta tamba sujin nga su ge de ge chi ju cha ka te ro to sa de ka sa che chu pe chu tang thu ge che to dos Google Classroom na Google zanda na sha ge is.
And we already added some of the web resources, like some of the videos that you guys had in your presentations, and some of the things that Jillian brought forward, and I brought forward in lectures, including the new Spicy Foods video is posted there now.
That data na shingi ta ju che shen da che chu ge ne lo jin kha shi ten yo de yang ko lan tema tho chong yo wa lo ne data re ani shen da gen jilin la ge ngoto chi sha ju re dina shen ga ngoto chi sha ju na ne kar sa ngasu ge kha cha u ten da tu anyong ai ko la lo ne ke chi che so te to la so pa ge ne ke che she chu ge ju cha ta ani chi ta ge ta tha ta de ju tan da ne gu gun zin da na sha sha yes.
And I do still want to collect your reviews of your other groups, as well as the one thing that you will remember or still need.
That they are diggings, Kesanga Sula Matis Tambalaya, ne Rokajenda Tamche Chibi Kapsa Chichu Jashan, which teaches some such Trugu or Tigi Shokoteta, and it didn't trick Sonatanda, and Cheranga Saba Jambatayana, Yerje Chimbegi, and Netonkarimba, Trachi Trichu or Tinchaya Dias.
Your notes for your classmates will be very helpful.
Mahanda and the Cheranga Trishajuge, Gonsutu, and a Loto Agenda Samalaya, and a pen Chembutokris.
If you want a copy of that for yourself, you can just take a quick picture with it. But if you give it to one person at the table, then they can bring it to us so we have it.
Take it, Cherang Caritri, Metila, Cherangaya, Tig, and Nitokano image, Shini to your pan, and your game by nine Perchijarochis. Temida Kari, your party somewhere, Nitroxi, Regan, me, Chilaya, Setache, and me, Chiki to see a Kionochis.
Any last questions, comments?
Dratama is, and the Samsatama is.
No. Tukjeche.
George. George. Tagi Sibin the Troa Marella so. And the Sibin la Troa yo Marabes George. Sibin la Troa.
This is so his question is you have mentioned that the spicy chili doesn't have taste. Is so it doesn't have it really doesn't have a test?
No. So quick question, quick. The spicy chili does have taste, but the heat that you feel is a temperature sensor as well. So it has temperature and flavor in it.
That driver is na ngazu Spencer na driver or spent driver wa imbana Spencer kaps khatsaj twa khatsawati kare system bala ngazu ge to taken on it, how swag Rasachua, or Tiris. The Koran la ya Tuati your system, la flavor Lanakala, that special Koran Rochi, Rakola, Imbanatina and to cut out to it, because a cut out to it, 카토 소야데 아니 ngasu ruga nas gum dwa te
나 카사고 소던게 로이 몰레 쳔네라 코는 시비 코로나 로 카라요 로 시나네 카데 되요
But also remember, most of the flavor that we get from that is actually from smell.
Oh, here's to settle the idea about the chilies and temperature. Has anybody ever touched his eyes after touching pepper? There are no taste buds in the eye, but you feel it.
to da ya chizu ta ba na spell la pa chano ji la la pa te mi la chaim bes mi na la ya nga su di yo marwa ru su ni lam ba yo marwa em ba na ya ko chag do was.
You're not tasting with your eyes.
His question is if the hotness is not a test, it's just his follow-up question is what test are there in chili?
Different ones, different chilies have different tastants.
Ta khorang ge karsu kore ta chawa te rumari se korwa imbaina tanga sudena runga se desi jagatwa nistambla spam ando wala ya khona na ruji te mando yores.
This sounds like a good debate question.
Dolan che ge jespe ya puchtos. Oh ya last takish ki kashikilish. Lasso, yeah. Yeah.
We have nothing else then. Neuroscience is over.
Lasso, what's the strategy to buy? Yes.